The Bible, the Word of God. There is more evidence for the historical reliability of the New Testament than any 10 pieces of classical literature combined. But what about the Old Testament? What about the manuscript authority? What about the accuracy of the Old Testament? The oldest complete copy of the Old Testament is the Leningrad manuscript copied around 1008 A.D. In other words, almost 2,000 years removed from the Old Testament to where we have the first complete copy. However, that long distance does not take away from the accuracy of what we have. And the reason is, the Jewish people so reverenced the Scriptures that they developed a group of professional people known as scribes. Let me give you, just historically, some of the things that the scribes did to guarantee the accuracy of the Old Testament. They had to use a copy that they copied from that had been verified to be accurate in all details. They would start to copy the Scriptures. When they would copy, between every consonant they could not touch, there had to be the distance of a hair between each consonant. There could only be so many consonants to a line and so many lines per every foot of the scroll. They had to transcribe everything letter by letter by letter. Now think of this, over 1 million consonants. And this is how they would do it. T, T, H, H, E, E. Letter for letter for letter, they had to transcribe the entire Old Testament. Or say, take a book like Isaiah, 60-some chapters. Then they would do this. They would go back and they would count every single word and indicate the center word. Because they knew out of the entire book of Isaiah what was the center word. Then they'd go back and they would count every single consonant and indicate the center consonant. Then they would go back and they would count every single time each consonant was used. And when they finished, now think of this, they could tell if they had added or left out a single consonant and what consonant it was. They were that committed to make sure that when they transcribed the Scriptures, it was accurate. Now, if they had made more than 2 mistakes that they had to correct, in other words, the third mistake, they could not use the manuscript. So they would take and place these manuscripts in the wooden cupboard called the Genitza. And when that wooden cupboard was full, they would take it out and bury it. And the reason we don't have a lot of the old manuscripts of the Old Testament is that they were buried on purpose, so they wouldn't be misread or anything. But the lack of those manuscripts in no way takes away from the authority of what we have, because they went through such painstaking care to make sure that they were accurate. There is no comparison in history to the accuracy and the commitment of the scribes in recording the Old Testament. And I think almost every time that I read the Old Testament, I thank God for the dedication of those scribes who worked night and day to guarantee, both in the Old Testament and then later in the New Testament, that we have the very Word of God.